Hey guys, it's Taylor here, and I am so glad you've come to the Grace Uncensored podcast by Clarity Magazine. This one's actually quite an exciting one because we're chatting with Kez, who is part of our Clarity team, which isn't really the norm, but we were working together on some features on body image and beauty and self-worth, some of the things that you guys asked for. 1.25 million people in the UK struggle with an eating disorder, and it's no surprise really that 75% are female. All you have to do is look at the history of advertising, magazines, and all of that stuff to see that women get it quite hard. Now, don't get me wrong, we know that for men it's often underrepresented and underreported just because of different things. But for now, as Clarity, we are going to chat about women's experience of beauty, body image, and Kez's story. So let's see what happened. Because you recently shared your story in Clarity Magazine on eating disorders. You talked a bit about body image, and I guess to start, I'm just wondering why did you choose to share now? Why did you feel it was a good time to share?
I guess, well, when we first talked about sharing it, I was at a point in my therapy journey where people who've been through therapy will probably, like, this will resonate with them, but you kind of go through a phase where you start off and you kind of unpack all this stuff. You start to understand yourself more. You start to ask deeper questions. You start to kind of just be more self-aware. But I think that was kind of the point where we first started talking about it, was when I was in that phase where I was like, actually, I've realised some really important stuff and I wish somebody had told me.
Right, okay.
And it breaks my heart now when I hear of people who are going down a similar road to me, because I wish I could just look them in the face and go, please, please stop. But I know that people tried to do that for me. It didn't work. You know, I pray that what we've covered, what we've kind of released into the world, I guess, is going to help people and kind of stop them at a point where they could turn back. They could, I'm not going to be like this, or I'm not going to go as far down this as I could have because I've read this.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that, you know, I think with most things, you don't necessarily know the impact you're going to have, but it's better than nothing. Like, if you know it's out there, and it's teaching people as well, not just the stop, but it's that you're not alone. It's just the most you can do is give someone the other option, even if it takes them a little longer than the kind of flip 180 revelation of reading it, you know, which can happen to some people. And I mean, for you kind of shared quite a broad story in a way, because you've experienced kind of both sides of your relationship with food and body image that might be recognized as kind of a control thing or an eating disorder. So both kind of eating too much, eating too little. And I guess I wanted to start with kind of the eating too much. I think you kind of referred to it as binge eating. And you mentioned that it was also during a time when you'd also hit puberty, so your body had started to change anyway. What was your kind of experience of that then? How did that play out?
It was crazy. So I have to kind of paint a picture, right? So I've been doing a paper round since I was like 12.
Amazing.
I know. I've always been in work. It's been great. I mean, hasn't it? But I think I was doing that, and that was a way for me to hide what I was doing, because I could go out on my paper round and eat like a whole thing of chocolate. And when I say a whole thing of chocolate, I don't mean the single bar. I mean like the big bar, somewhere in that region of amount of food before breakfast. So I was able to conceal that by getting rid of the evidence, because I was out on my round anyway. And that was my time on my own. Probably I'd say, you know, that time where I potentially could have worked through what was going on in my head, but I decided to smother it. That's the word I want.
Smuggle the chocolate.
I did do that, to be fair. But to kind of smother it and not look into what was going on in my head, not process what was going on in my family, but to just comfort eat, to be honest.
Right.
So it started off as comfort eating because I was just hurting, probably, I think.
Okay. I was going to say that was your time out of the home as well, so it kind of makes sense that you just mentioned things were going on at home, so maybe like when you're out it feels like a safe space, and that's where those kind of habits
can kind of develop and thrive maybe. But so what, you mentioned things going on at home, what sort of unrest was there, and do you think that that's what spurred this on? Do you think that's what caused it, or do you just think it played a part in kind of how you were feeling at the time?
I think it played a part in a bigger insecurity that was in me anyway. And kind of, so yeah, what happened with my family was very, very sad. And kind of if it had happened now, there would have been so many safeguards put in place. There would have been so many kind of agencies that would have been onto us, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because, you know, I've worked with children since in a youth worker, children's worker role. And I've worked with families who have been on people's radar, and I look at their situation and go, wow, that would have been us.
Right, okay.
So this happened nearly 10, 11 years ago, somewhere around that sort of time. So it's a fair amount of time ago. I was 7. And my oldest sister, who I love very dearly and have a very, very good relationship now, I need to stress that before I say any of this, is that we are,
of course,
completely reconciled. All glory to God for that. And she is one of my best friends. But what happened was really sad. She developed an eating disorder herself. She was bulimic, and kind of had some issues around anorexia, but never fully went that way. She just lost a lot of weight because of the bulimia. And kind of her relationship with my parents was quite difficult at that point. I remember multiple evenings where I'd be woken up because everybody was shouting, not being able to get much sleep. Like, it was a very tense time. That's the only word I can use to describe it. It was tense, and you knew it. You know, you come home from school and there'd be something happening. So she actually made the decision to leave the family home because she didn't feel that she could stay when she was 16. I don't like to use the phrase running away. That has been used in the past around this situation, but it was bigger than that. I think running away makes it sound too teenage and too angsty, but actually it was a decision for her well-being, I'd say, that she had to take.
Wow.
So she decided to leave, and I remember that night clear as day, like it was yesterday. I remember pleading with her to stay, and being left crying at the door after she'd slammed it because she wouldn't. So that kind of, it felt like the family just kind of broke in what was then an irreparable way, to be honest.
Okay, yeah. And of course, at your age, like having that, seeing it from that side, that is what it feels like. If that's your whole world in a way, isn't it? You've got school and you've got family, and it's hard to, at that age, you can't really play out the rest of your life and the options and the kind of reconciliation, all these things that can happen when it feels like your family breaks. That feels like there's nothing you can do, and you put it on yourself a little bit, don't you? You know,
black and white and final, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So do you think that's where, do you think it was maybe a control thing then, kind of gaining back some sort of control? Like, what do you think the kind of root trigger was then, if you're kind of beginning to eat a lot more and kind of keeping those things a secret?
I'd say it was a control thing, 100%. And also because obviously I was 7, so heading towards puberty, and then my body started changing in a way that was different to how my sisters had. And so I felt like I was bigger because that was just what my body was doing. But that then wasn't helped with all the emotional eating that I was doing around not being able to control what was going on, which then exacerbated the issue and made me feel worse. So then I kept eating because I didn't know how to process the emotions. So it just was a big circle. It just kept going and going and going. And so from the ages of, I'd say 11 through probably till I moved out when I was 18, I had this really difficult relationship with food where I would eat what was given to me by my parents, plus whatever I could get my hands on when I needed it. It was always very secretive. It was always, I'd go up to my room and eat and then try and hide it and then come back down and act like I was fine. Or I'd, do what I said, do my paper round, eat, hide it, act like I was fine. And I think that's really the key with binge eating, is when people can be aware that maybe they're starting to have a less good relationship with food is when it becomes secretive, honestly. I've since obviously interacted with quite a few people who are trying to be more positive about their bodies. And one of the things that they talk about is, make food something that's open. Eat it with your family. If you're going to eat it, don't make it something that's shameful, because if that's what you need at that moment, that's not a bad thing. So just kind of being kinder and making more allowances, I guess, for yourself.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's a really, really cool perspective. I think you've actually said a couple of things that even have kind of a shape in my perspective. Yeah, because actually if you're eating something, why can't it be public? And when you start to notice that you feel it can't, then that's quite an obvious
sign.
A sign, pointed to there being a problem. That's really, really interesting. And it is like that, isn't it? Because, sometimes with my husband, I'll say, oh, Nathan, I actually just want to eat a whole something today. It's that kind of day. Might be a certain time of the month. And that's not anything that, is a deep rooted problem, because it's balanced and you can kind of, everything is visible. It's really interesting. And so I guess for you, like with this unrest and your sister having kind of a previous issue with like the bulimia and kind of controlling her food, do you think that maybe your family or your parents then were kind of, well, I don't know, did they notice the problem, or were they just kind of happy that you were eating, so therefore
It was the reverse. Well, in conversations I've had more recently, they knew that I was doing it, which I find really interesting, because obviously nothing they could say would have changed it. I really don't think it would have, because I was at a point where, nobody saying, oh, you're really pretty or whatever, like giving me compliments, that didn't make a difference to how I felt. So it almost, when they said it, I would immediately discredit in my head and say that they were lying, or that they were only being nice, or that they had to say it, or it was duty, or whatever. That would be the internal dialogue, that what they were saying wasn't true. So even if my parents did know, I don't think they could have said anything or done anything to stop me. I do think that they were scared that we would go down the same path, for sure. I think I wrote in the article about asking if I could start running or go into the gym or something like that, or cut down portions. And my mum immediately just said no. There was no discussion. There was no space. And I don't blame her for that, because she'd watched one child be destroyed by an eating disorder and then have a really rocky relationship with the rest of the family. And she was doing everything in her power to avoid that happening to the rest of us.
Of course.
But that kind of tipped it the other way for me. So it's really hard. Being a parent is really hard. And it's such a difficult thing to have good conversations around food, and even just educating yourself about your habits is really important, and being able to just kind of have more open discussions. I think that's something that my sister, now she's had a baby, is really trying to do, is to have that, let's just talk about it. She is a psychologist, so she's like way aware of feelings and emotions and all that kind of stuff. But she's much more pro talking as a means of understanding ourselves, understanding emotion, so that we don't have to resort to those coping mechanisms, so that we don't have to hide how we feel. Because the binge eating was a metaphor for me not being able to express, and therefore needing to hide how I felt, because I felt I always had to be okay. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And you said about like it didn't matter what anyone could say to you, like even if they affirmed you or complimented you, that actually this was something a lot deeper that was going on inside you. And when we had the interview for Clarity magazine, you mentioned body dysmorphia, which I think you were later diagnosed with. And I guess it would just be helpful to get kind of an explanation from you what that means, and also, how did you see yourself, kind of in a nutshell? How did you see yourself when you looked in the mirror?
Yeah, so it's something that obviously I've had CBT therapy about I finished it like 2 weeks into lockdown, so it's a very recent end of journey for me. But actually understanding what it meant made me understand how I saw myself in the past, if that makes sense. Just feel like I need to clarify that. So when I was younger, I would say that it all kind of started in comparison, first within my family. So I would compare myself to my oldest sister, even though I knew that she wasn't healthy. I understood that. I knew that she wasn't well. I knew there was something not right. But to me, being a certain way was more important than the means to get there, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I knew that she had disordered eating. I wouldn't have used that terminology at the time, but I knew that something was up. But it didn't matter because she had achieved what I wanted. And in that case, she was skinnier than me. So it started within the home. I have another sister who is naturally just very petite. She's shorter than me. She's just much petiter than me. But I saw that and I went, why am I not like that? Why am I not like that? And I kind of looked at my other sister again, and her body shape is more similar to me. We're curvier out of all of us, I'd say. But she was still quite slim, where I felt I was expanding uncontrollably, which wasn't true. Right. That was not true. That perception was wrong. I wasn't expanding uncontrollably. I was putting on weight, yes, but not at a ridiculous speed. It would be, when we went to buy clothes, maybe once a year, I might have put on a bit and then had to go up a dress size. But then the next year, I might be the same size. But then the next year, I might have gone up again. So it wasn't like I put on loads in a short amount of time. But to me, it was a constant, I'm bigger and I shouldn't be. And kind of that now I'd say translates into I saw myself at least 2 sizes bigger than I actually was. And that's something that I still struggle with now. I can recognize that pattern kind of. Whereas when I was younger, there was no word for this. There was no idea of body dysmorphia. It was just eating disorders or normal people. There was no in between. So actually having the terminology is really helpful, I'd say, for me, to finding out, because it's not a label that I live my life by. It's something that helps me understand my brain better.
Yeah, of course.
And if that means I get better access to help, then I'm all for it. But it's not who I am. It's part of what I'm working through, I guess. So
and it's important. I think in anything, we all have our little quirks and the kind of pathways we've created in our brain and our thoughts that tend to be our go-to. And it's so important, if they are negative, to just develop ways to catch them and to see them for what they are, see them clearly. So it's all really helpful and really good stuff. So that's brilliant. And I think at that age as well, I don't know if you kind of had this, but you kind of are at the age where you're shopping at the same shops, and you kind of, like all teenagers in my world seem to do the same thing. It was very much a new look era. We had a new
my
look
life,
in our little small town. But then I think even something as simple as understanding that as you get older, even dress sizes are a myth, because you go to one shop and you feel great, and you go to the other shop and it makes you feel awful. But you can't, something in that you can't seem to rationalize, because they've both got the same tag.
It's the same number,
different sizes. It's not me. And yet even still, we put so many beauty myths on ourselves. I think you got involved with a feature. You wrote a feature recently about peace and body image, and we were talking about how even around the world beauty looks completely different. So how 100%. Can there be a monopoly? And yet we just put it on ourselves, which is just really, really interesting.
It's frustrating, honestly. It does my head in, because that's one of the scenarios that causes me the most anxiety, I have to say. But having that reminder, like, oh my life, this is ridiculous. My one of my sisters recently sent me a photo because she'd bought 3 different pairs of shorts that were all one size, and she lined them up one on top of the other, and they were all different. No wonder so many of us have issues. You're screwing with mind. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, for sure. It's all like this strange illusion.
Yeah.
So you were kind of in that world, family, kind of your sisters, shopping, comparison. So you mentioned to me that when you left home, it was then that it kind of went the other way, because you were able to start kind of restricting your food intake. How did you kind of swing to the other side of the pendulum, if you like? How did that start to develop as a habit?
There was one photo that tipped me over the edge, and I remember it clearly, and it comes up on my memories every year, but now it's kind of a victory thing for me. Just I looked how I never wanted to look, that I didn't think that I should look like that. And it was a personal thing. It's not a everybody should look like that thing at all. It was a very personal, I can't look like that. It wasn't even a statement on what other people look like. It was a very me. It was what I needed. It was what I decided. And I was dressed up as the Wicked Witch of the West for a 2-year-old's party. I'd painted myself green and everything. And there was a photo that somebody took of me because they were impressed with the makeup that I'd done, because I was literally green all over. I commit to things. It was that I just went, I can't do this anymore. And I tried to be healthier. I tried to eat healthier once I'd left home. I think I wrote in the article that my family had gone on a healthy regime. I wasn't in the headspace to do it, so I just ate what I wanted outside of what they gave me. So once I was actually on my own, I was really, really trying to eat healthily, but nothing was changing. It was a really horrible, horrible headspace to be in. I remember it came over me almost like a depression, and then it lifted as I started the diet that I started. I did all my research. A friend that I'd gone to school with had done the diet that I did. I'm not going to name it because it doesn't need any credit, and I don't want anybody looking at it. Because I think
appreciated.
I think it's dangerous. If I'm very honest, it gets a lot of publicity anyway, and if you can avoid it, please do. But I'd spoken to this friend about it, and she seemed really happy. She seemed really happy, and I wanted to be that happy about how I looked. I wanted to be that confident. I wanted to be that comfortable. And so I sought out a consultant in my area, and they play it very well. They advertise it as if it's a very healthy option. And it's, they say that doctors recommend it and all this kind of stuff. But wow, no. I don't know why doctors recommend it. I do if people are verging on hurting their bodies because of their weight. I understand it in dramatic circumstances, but even then, not really. But I think that there should be more of a screening process than there was assessing people's mental health, to be honest. Because I said all the right things to get them to take me on, but actually if they dug deeper, they would have seen that I wasn't well. I didn't know it. But that was an opportunity where it could have been stopped. But the screening process isn't strong enough, and at the end of the day the consultants want clients, so they're running a business. So
And so you started this kind of diet, and did you stay kind of contained in that, or did it then escalate into something greater? I mean, you mentioned before about you were very you were kind of calorie counting, but to the point where even meeting your friend maybe for a coffee or like whatever it was became just really tricky to deal with.
So the diet itself lasted about 6 to 8 months. It was 600 calories a day of their products. So it was marketed as 200 calories per meal, and everything you need is in it. So all your vitamins, all your whatever you need, you're not going to be deficient because you're doing this. Essentially, you're just kicking your body's metabolism and making it work better. That's what it was advertised as.
Sold as, yeah.
So I did total diet replacement, which is what that stage is called. I did that for about it must have been nearly 4 months.
And that's a long time.
Yeah, so I started in 6th of June 2018, and I was coming off total diet replacement in August. So 2 to 3 4 months, it kind of blurred into one because I kind of fluctuated between stages at a while, at one point even. And so you went from that stage up to 2 products a day and a meal, but that was still only 200, 300 calories maximum. So you were only upping your calories very, very slightly. And at that point, you were encouraged to start incorporating exercises. So I started running.
Right.
And then kind of build up from there.
And so, I mean, what is the recommended calorie intake for a woman? Isn't it like 1,200 something or something?
1,500 to 2,000 to maintain your weight.
Okay, and then obviously, you know, it's good to exercise and things like that.
But that's the baseline for what your body needs to function.
Yeah, exactly. So you might say if you're exercising and you want to just be maintaining your weight, you'd probably eat a little more. Or if you were someone who needed to lose a few pounds for whatever reason, health reasons, or to be a little bit more comfortable, you then might just do the exercise. But so we're talking, you're literally eating there like half, even more than half the amount you should be eating, and then you're then incorporating running.
Yeah.
Wowee.
Yeah, and that was recommended as part of the program. So obviously,
the devil is a liar.
Oh, preach it! Oh my life. Yeah, 100%, 100%. I look back at it and I go, what in the name of sanity was I doing? And at that point, I was working full time. Super into church, but cripplingly into exercise.
Right, okay.
It was at that point where the calorie counting was paramount. It was that was my life. My Fitness Pal, I'm just saying this, don't let people lie to you. My Fitness Pal is a diet because you're controlling what you're eating. Even if you think it's good for you or whatever, you are doing something that is counting. You're potentially restricting as a result of what you're inputting, and that is a diet. So it's very just to be clear that it's not a bad thing to watch what you're eating. It's not a bad thing to want to eat healthily. But when it becomes obsessive, when it becomes, oh, I can't have that because I've had my calories for the day, that's when there's an opportunity for something to become an issue, because that was my mentality. It was, have I earned this food? As opposed to, I deserve to eat food. It was, I must exercise, otherwise I can't eat.
Yeah, and that's a completely different,
a
completely different way of putting it, isn't it?
100%. So it was at that point where I was exercising at least 5 to 6 out of 7 days a week.
Right.
I lived 40 minutes away from work walking, and I either walked or cycled that.
On top of the exercise?
Yeah. And then went to work or went for a run when I got home.
So you're even burning through a lot of those calories that you were the small number of calories you were eating. I mean, you must have been knackered.
Oh man, I was so tired, but I just convinced myself it was the transition from intern life hours to 9 to 5, because everybody says you get really tired when you start doing 9 to 5, and I'd convinced myself that was what it was, but it just didn't really go away. I was just tired all the time, and I slept, but I never woke up feeling well or like awake, or like I was less tired. It was really crazy, and I missed out on a lot of social life because I had to go to the gym. My friends from work would go out for a drink or just hang out, and I'd be like, no, I've got to go to the gym. And my friend, who I love her to bits, Lyd, she's incredible. She actually had struggled with eating stuff herself and was desperately trying to help me. I just didn't want to listen, because I was like, no, I've got to do this, otherwise I'll put on weight. Then honestly, now I recognize it and understand my thought process. It was about being worthy and good enough, and I didn't think that I was worthy or good enough until I was a certain way. And I hate to say it and admit it, but it was also for guys. I wanted the attention. I'd never got the attention in school because I was a nerdy kid. I went to an all-girls school anyway, so my options were non-existent. And I thought that would get me a boyfriend, I guess. at the core, that was what I wanted. And I thought that this change, that this restriction, that this size would get me that. And it didn't.
Right.
So it made me worse when it didn't.
Right. And I guess with these things like this, you're always chasing this idea of fulfillment or satisfaction, or the moment that it becomes worth it. And I guess it just never comes, really.
Yeah, and it didn't. It never did. I still had a fair amount of rejection when I was doing what I was doing, and that was really tough, because I was like, this was supposed to fix this problem, and it didn't. But your worth is not found in a guy, people. You are enough in and of yourself. You do not need somebody to complete you. Only the Lord can do that. And until you let him complete you, anything else is just going to fall short. And that's I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so many of us do learn the hard way. And I guess, well, actually, you've said it sounded like you had about 10 sisters when you were telling your story. How many sisters do you have?
I have 3 sisters and a brother.
So you've got 3 sisters and a brother, and you were at an all-girls school, so you've been around quite a lot of girls. And just listening to what you're saying, I mean, do you think there's a reason that it's 75% of people with an eating disorder are female? Now, of course, we know that in some cases men struggle to come forward with things like this, and it's a little bit more hidden, but in terms of the numbers, it's a majority that are female. What do you think about that?
I would say that very recently there has been a shift in advertising where men are targeted as much, if not more, than women. But historically, I'm talking like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe into the 90s, 2000s. It was, these are your beauty ideals. This is how you should look. And if you don't, here's a solution. The 80s is known for when that was the era that people started running. Like people do that before then, 80s and 90s, and that was kind of the fitness craze. You see people in leg warmers and leotards because it was this sudden shift in mentality that we all have to look a certain way. And it wasn't even, I don't think it was a conscious decision. I think it was subliminal. I think it was in advertising. It was in billboards, magazines, starting to creep in television as that was more of a thing, films. The Bond girls were always an ideal. However they looked, and actually if you look at them, you see the shift in what the beauty ideal has been. And if you want to go all the way to the top, if you want to go all the way to the top of these corporations that are beauty things, historically they weren't even owned by women.
Right.
So it was, slight feminist agenda coming right now. But it was an ideal that was historically set by men. Now it is both, for sure. And we have played into it for a very long time because we've not had the voices, the terminology, the understanding of mental health, of different body types even. To be able to say, well, that might be healthy for you, but what's healthy for you might not be healthy for me, and what's healthy for me might not be healthy for you because you've got this medical condition, or you've got, you're this height. Also, BMI is a load of rubbish. I'm going to throw it out there right now. It has been disproved so many times, yet it is still used as a health indicator by doctors, and it is not true. According to the BMI chart, even when I was at my smallest and my illest, I was still overweight.
Yeah.
And
I'm with you.
I was 10 stone, edging towards 9, doing everything I could to get under that barrier. But I was really unwell. But the chart said that I was overweight.
Which is never helpful if you're in that mental space as well. I've known the same thing, like really healthy people, often actually in fitness, and kind of, having controlled diets, but more for kind of sport reasons and different things, energy and stamina, and they've been well overweight because of height, like different things, like they're just 100%. Maybe a little bit shorter than they should be, but too muscly for the fact they're that short or whatever. It's just ridiculous. I get that it works kind of in a broad sense when we're talking about extreme cases, but it's not the most helpful when you're kind of just the average middly kind of
person.
people.
Yeah, which most people actually do fit into that category, and advertising and a set idea of what beauty should look like is set with a really, really skinny person in mind historically.
And actually, there's so many people I know that are very slim that eat absolute rubbish. And I think, but think of your heart. Yeah. Actually, it's funny, but it's serious. I think for me, it took a long time, and now I actually just kind of saying it now, I'm realizing I have actually come to a much more peaceful place on this. Like, I really believe our responsibility to ourselves and our responsibility to God is health. Full stop.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, as in, I'm not, and it's really hard to find this balance, and really hard for me, being honest, not a great thing, but not to look at people and their habits and make a judgment. So, for example, for me, like, I'm very passionate about health. So if someone, even like my husband, if he decides to eat a whole tub of Pringles, I get upset. but it's nothing to do with the way he looks. And actually, I shouldn't even be judging that moment, because I know, just for ourselves, I can actually measure this information because we are us and we live together. I know that we talk and we make decisions. We say, salmon stir fry tonight, and we probably shouldn't have this, just because we've been overindulging and we're talking about health. But then it might come to the weekend and it's like, Chinese, baby, like, and it's fine. And I just think you only know in yourself, honestly, if you have a balanced and measured kind of approach to whether you're keeping yourself healthy enough to honor the life that God's given you and to do the work set before you.
Yeah.
And if you are, and you fancy a pack of biscuits at the weekend, do you know what I mean? Like, it's only you that knows that. And I think too often, like we said about BMI, we can look at people or look at ourselves and we take a snapshot of that one action and we get fixated.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's my thing. I think, be healthy. It's not good. If you have a bad relationship with food and you're abusing your body, that's not good.
Yeah, because actually my over-exercising was self-harm.
Right, exactly.
I recognise it as now. It was a form of self-harm that nobody else picked up on, because to the rest of the world, aren't you doing great? You're being really healthy. But they don't know what's going on in your head. They don't know what the inner battle is. Actually, even just letting go of the idea that food is good or bad. Like, let's scrap that. That is a load of rubbish. Food is food.
Yeah.
Your body needs it. If you decide that you want to have a burger one day, great, go nuts. If you decide you want to eat a salad one day, great, also go nuts. But do what you want for your body that keeps you happy, that keeps you healthy, and sack the rest of the world, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. Couldn't have put it better myself. So true, so true. Check out part 2 of our body image chat on the next episode. And as always, everything we do here at Clarity Magazine is done by volunteers. So to support our work, go and get your Clarity Magazine or any of the merch at claritymag.co.uk.